The iPad Air 2nd generation was released all the way back in October of 2014, bringing a whole lot of new features to the iPad line. It was revolutionary then, and continued to be throughout its life. It holds the title for the longest software-supported mobile device of all time, as far as I'm aware. Although it does now share that title with the iPad Pro 1st generation. It was released with iOS 8 and only just recently was dropped major software support in October 2022. Having not received iOS, or iPadOS as it's now called, 16, which means it's stuck on iPadOS 15. October 2014 to October 2022 makes for a full 8 years of software support. Plus, it still receives regular security updates too, so how usable is it 8.5 years later? The iPad Air 2 may look familiar to a lot of people, and that's because its design is similar to an iPad Apple still sells today, the iPad 9. It was, more or less, the iPad that introduced this design, weighing in at 437 grams for the Wi-Fi model and 444 grams for the cellular model. That's pretty impressive, especially when mentioning that the newest model of the line, the Air 5, weighs in at 461 grams. It's pretty standard. Touch ID home button on the bottom, which was the first time this feature was seen in the iPad line. Lock button and headphone jack on top, with the volume buttons on the side. It's not a bad design and is comfortable to hold. It has Apple's Retina display, which is actually laminated, something not seen on both the iPad 9 and 10. The display has a resolution of 2048 by 1536 pixels, giving it a pixel density of 264 pixels per inch, which wasn't bad for the time and is completely acceptable today. But behind the screen is perhaps where the more interesting story is. The device is powered by the A8X chip, which is a close relative to the chip found inside the iPhone 6. But now it has an extra core, which definitely helped the reason as to why it received more iOS updates than the 6, 3 more to be precise. But that's not the whole reason. The iPad Air 2 was the first iOS device to come with 2GB of RAM, an extra gigabyte over the Air 1 and iPhone 6. This is also the reason the iPad Mini 4 made it to iPadOS 15, because it has the A8 chip like the 6, but 2GB of RAM as well. The iPad made it this far in terms of software support, but should it have? Short answer, yes. The experience here is not bad at all. It may lag here or there, and stuff isn't going to load nearly as fast as newer iPads, but they do load, and very rarely do I come across an issue, and it's not one that makes me want to put the tablet down and stop using it. It always gets the job done, and smooth enough that it's not inconvenient. Just moving around the OS here paints a relatively good picture of what the experience of using the iPad is like. Sure, the App Store takes its time to load, but how often are you using it? An app you use more often would be YouTube, which opens much faster and loads videos just fine. Most mobile games run on here just fine as well. There's even less lag when in most apps than there is just scrolling on the home screen. This is of course relying on the fact that your battery hasn't completely degraded. The challenging part soon enough for this device will be finding apps compatible with it. Since the iPad Air 2 did not receive iPadOS 16, it's stuck on 15, which is fine for now and mainly only misses out on the customization updates that came with it. Most apps either have iOS 13 or 15 as the current minimum for downloading the latest version, but as time goes on, that's going to change, and then you'll be getting the latest compatible version, but that won't be for a few more years at least. There's your 8 megapixel camera on the back. It was pretty standard for 2014, but it's probably the thing that holds up worst on this device. You don't usually find the best cameras in a tablet, but there aren't many people going around taking photos of the tablet either. There's also the 1.2 megapixel selfie camera, which isn't amazing either. The cameras on the iPad Air 2 are more designed for something like a FaceTime call, something which it can do well. And that's what the iPad Air 2 is, all these years later. Capable. Capable of nearly everything you could need from a basic tablet. It's just incredible exactly how long it's lasted. You have to remember this thing is only 1 and a bit years shy of being a decade old, and its current operating system was released a year and a bit ago. It's a pretty consumer-friendly move by Apple to do something like this. Since it had similar internals to the iPhone 6, it wouldn't have been completely unreasonable to have it been left on iOS 13. I doubt many would have complained either, as that would have made for a full 6 years of support, and still makes for an extra year over the iPhone 6 and Air 1. But they didn't, and kept it going, not because they were purposefully trying to slow it down to force people to upgrade, but because it was capable of receiving these updates, so why not? It of course doesn't receive everything that come with these updates, or that newer models have. On the hardware side, there's no smart connector for Apple's keyboards, and no support for Apple Pencils either. On the software side, you miss out on things like Sidecar with macOS, which basically makes it a second screen for your Mac. There's certain AR features you miss out on as well, but a lot of people who would be using this kind of device are probably people who don't know what these features are. And those are the kind of people who will happily use this device for a few more good years before deciding it's time for an upgrade. Heck, I know some people who are still using the first generation Air, which runs iOS 12. If you are someone who's looking to upgrade from this tablet, because it is almost 9 years old at this point, I highly recommend checking out Apple's refurbished store in the iPad section, or having a look at the iPad 9th generation, because it is way faster despite having the same design due to having the A13 chip. The battery life's going to be better, you get Apple Pencil support, and software support for another 6 years at least. There is the iPad 10 as well, but for the price increase, it doesn't necessarily bring enough features to make that seem worthwhile, and doesn't support the newer Apple Pencil either. So I do believe all around the iPad 9th gen would be a better upgrade for someone coming from a tablet like this. But at the end of the day, the iPad Air 2 has an amazing legacy, and continues to live an impressive life, having some of the best software support ever seen for a mobile device. It has been, and will continue to be, a great tablet for many people until its eventual obsolescence once apps outright stop supporting iPadOS 15. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you did, please consider subscribing or leaving a like, and hopefully, I'll see you next time.